On Sunday, May 24th, 2026, while the world was waiting for the announcement that would formally end the Iran war, a single Iranian news agency published a single sentence that told anyone paying attention exactly what was about to happen. Tasnim news agency, which is not an ordinary Iranian media outlet but rather the institutional voice of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, published this: "There is still a possibility that the agreement may be canceled." That sentence was not a leak. It was not a warning. It was a statement of institutional intent from the single most powerful organization inside the Islamic Republic, the organization that controls Iran's navy, Iran's missiles, Iran's mines in the Strait of Hormuz, and the economic empire that sustains its own survival. Tasnim does not publish by accident. When Tasnim says a deal might be canceled, it means the Revolutionary Guard has not approved the deal. And when the Revolutionary Guard has not approved a deal in the Islamic Republic of Iran in 2026, the deal does not happen. To understand why the Guard is blocking this agreement at the precise moment when every other actor in the negotiation believes it is 90% complete, you need to understand the specific clause they are obstructing. It is not the nuclear question, though the nuclear question remains entirely unresolved. It is not the Hormuz reopening, though the definition of what open means is still being contested. The clause the Revolutionary Guard is using to hold the entire agreement hostage is $12 billion. Specifically, the $12 billion in Iranian assets that have been frozen in Qatar and in other overseas accounts since the war began, and the question of whether those assets are released before or after the Strait of Hormuz reopens. Iran's position, communicated through Tasnim on Sunday morning, is unambiguous. Without the release of a specific portion of Iran's blocked assets in the first step, along with a clear mechanism for the guaranteed, continued release of all blocked assets, there will be no agreement. The funds must be released at the start of the Memorandum of Understanding, not at the end. They must be genuinely accessible for Iran to use, not held in a third-party escrow account that Washington can restrict at any future moment. A mechanism must be in place for the gradual release of the remainder throughout the 60-day negotiation period that follows. These are not new Iranian demands. They are the same demands Iran has made in every nuclear negotiation since 2015. What is new is that the Revolutionary Guard's media organ is now attaching them as a precondition to the war-ending agreement that everyone else in the room believes has already been reached in principle. The American position is the precise opposite, and it has been stated clearly by senior United States officials on Sunday. The unfreezing of Iranian assets will occur only once the Strait of Hormuz has reopened, not before. Washington's logic is straightforward, releasing $12 billion to a government whose Revolutionary Guard controls the Strait of Hormuz before the strait is open, removes the primary leverage the United States has to ensure the strait actually opens. The moment the money is in Iranian hands, the incentive structure changes. The Guard has its funds. The war is technically over by announcement. Whether the strait opens to full pre-war traffic levels or remains under Iranian management with 33 ships per day instead of 138 is now Iran's decision to make without economic pressure. This is not a misunderstanding. Both sides understand the other's position perfectly. The gap between them on the frozen assets question is a structural disagreement about sequencing that reflects a deeper disagreement about trust. Iran does not trust that once the strait opens, the United States will actually release the funds. The history of American behavior toward Iranian assets over the past decade provides Tehran with a reasonable foundation for that distrust. In 2015, the Obama administration negotiated the JCPOA and released billions in frozen assets. In 2018, Trump unilaterally withdrew from that agreement, reimposed sanctions, and Iran's access to its own funds was severed again. The IRGC's demand for upfront asset release before any Iranian action is not paranoia. It is institutional memory operating rationally from a track record. Washington does not trust that once the assets are released, Iran will actually open the strait to pre-war traffic levels. The American track record on this is equally clear. 33 ships per day, authorized and coordinated by the Revolutionary Guard, is not the Strait of Hormuz that existed before February 28th, 138 ships per day move through that waterway freely, without Iranian authorization, without IRGC coordination fees, without inspection procedures that the Guard controls. The deal that Iran's state media is describing, even in its most optimistic version, returns Hormuz to pre-war levels within 30 days and keeps it under Iranian management indefinitely. That is a fundamentally different strait than the one the global economy depended on before this war started. Behind the frozen assets dispute is something that almost no Western analysis is addressing directly. The $12 billion that Iran is demanding is not destined for the Iranian treasury. It is destined, in substantial measure, for the Revolutionary Guard's own financial infrastructure. The IRGC is not simply Iran's military. It is Iran's largest economic actor, controlling construction companies, energy contracts, logistics networks, smuggling operations, and financial channels that collectively represent the economic foundation of the Guard's institutional independence. The Guard's ability to sustain itself, to pay its soldiers, to fund its proxy networks in Lebanon and Yemen and Iraq, and to maintain the arsenal that makes it the effective sovereign of the country, depends on access to foreign currency in volumes that domestic Iranian oil revenue, under blockade, cannot provide. An Iran that signs a peace deal with the United States, opens the Strait to free international traffic, surrenders its enriched uranium to a third party, and agrees to nuclear monitoring, is an Iran where the Revolutionary Guard's economic empire begins to contract. The civilian government gains legitimacy. Foreign investment returns. The official banking system, not the Guard's parallel currency channels, becomes the dominant mechanism for international transactions. The contractors who currently depend on Guard relationships for every significant government project start negotiating with civil authorities instead. The Guard's grip on Iran weakens precisely in proportion to how complete the peace agreement is. This is why Tasnim published that sentence on Sunday morning. The Revolutionary Guard does not want this war to end on terms that diminish its institutional power. It wants the $12 billion released upfront because upfront release means the Guard controls how those funds are used before any external monitoring mechanism is in place. It wants the Strait to remain under IRGC management because management means the Guard retains the ability to define what traffic is authorized, what vessels pay what coordination fees, and which shipping companies negotiate directly with Guard officials rather than through the Iranian Foreign Ministry. It wants the nuclear question deferred for 60 days because 60 days is 60 days, during which the enriched uranium stockpile remains under IRGC control rather than transferred to a third party, where it loses its value as a deterrent. President Trump posted on Sunday that the United States would not rush into an agreement. He said if he makes a deal with Iran, it will be completely different from the Obama deal, the exact opposite. He did not say what the exact opposite means in practical terms. He did not say what happens if the frozen assets dispute is not resolved. He did not address Tasnim's cancellation warning directly. He said he would not rush. The deal that was supposed to be announced shortly on Saturday evening is, as of Sunday afternoon, still unannounced, still unsigned, and still conditional on a sequencing dispute about $12 billion that both sides have been unable to resolve for the entirety of this war. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said in Sweden on Friday that America and its allies must have a Plan B if Iran refuses to reopen the Strait. Nobody has described what Plan B is. The UAE pipeline that bypasses Hormuz is still under construction and years from operational capacity. Israel has been pressing for a resumption of military operations against Iranian infrastructure since the ceasefire took effect. Additional American strikes on Iranian oil facilities would deepen the economic crisis that is already contributing to American inflation at levels not seen in years, which is the domestic political problem that is driving Trump's urgency to announce a deal in the first place. The Supreme Leader has reportedly endorsed the broad template of the deal. That endorsement matters because without Mojtaba Khamenei's approval, even a Revolutionary Guard that wants the deal dead cannot formally block it. But the Guard does not need to formally block a deal it disagrees with. It needs only to ensure that the specific clauses it depends on, the asset release sequencing, the Hormuz management definition, the nuclear deferral, remain unresolved long enough that the deal collapses of its own internal contradictions, as every previous agreement in this conflict has collapsed. The pattern is the same pattern. The foreign ministry negotiates. The Guard publishes its objections through Tasnim. The deal that everyone says is 90% complete fails to cross the final 10% because the 10% that remains is the 10% the Guard controls. It happened on April 17th. It happened during the Islamabad talks. It is happening again today, while the world waits for an announcement that Tasnim has already told it may not come. The question is no longer whether the deal is largely negotiated. Trump said it was largely negotiated. A senior American official confirmed the broad principles have been agreed. Pakistan's foreign minister praised the commitment to dialogue. The question is whether $12 billion gets released before or after the Strait opens, and whether the Revolutionary Guard, which has successfully blocked every serious diplomatic resolution of this conflict since it began 86 days ago, will allow the answer to that question to be the one that ends its own institutional dominance. The answer from Tasnim is that the Guard has not decided. The possibility of cancellation remains, and the Strait of Hormuz, on the 86th day of this war, remains under Iranian management, with 33 ships per day crossing it, while 138 is the number that crossed it freely the day before the war began.